Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and the newest episode of the Orville Future Unknown released onto Hulu last night, and it brings New Horizons to a close. And this episode really came across as a series finale rather than a season finale, leaving the door open still for a potential season 4 if it gets renewed, but closing things off enough that fans are satisfied in case that doesn't happen. Now, I fully hope and pray that it gets to season 4 because this was a really good season. I am slightly concerned with how much influence Disney will have at this point for a potential season 4, but Seth MacFarlane has done a really good job with the Orville in the past, so maybe he'd be enough to keep it going good after Disney's involvement. But overall, this episode was a tad disappointing to me. Despite its prevalence for dialogue, it really didn't say anything in my opinion. The character work was incredibly lacking, especially for a finale episode of this caliber. I still very much enjoyed it, but I think it might actually be the worst episode of New Horizons because of the lack of character work. There was no action either. Really, not a whole lot happened. It was just about resolving a lot of the character stuff in as quick a way as possible. Now, I did enjoy a lot of that stuff, but it really didn't come across as really heartfelt or memorable or impactful. And this episode was far more comedy-based than the rest of New Horizons has been, and that's something that I'm not as attracted to as other people might be. This show, I feel like, is at its absolute best when it is the least comedic, when it focuses on philosophy and ethics, and it's just good sci-fi rather than a comedy show. And this episode really harkened back to early season 1 when it was focused near solely on comedy. And that's just not something that attracts or appeals to me. That might be different for you, but that heavy reliance on comedy really drew me out of the episode. Some parts were funny, but it was just too much for an episode of this season, which has been so phenomenal in a thought-provoking way up to this point. But before I get any further, there will be minor spoilers ahead, so spoiler alert. Now, throughout the episode, there were some good scenes, but out of context. With the context of New Horizons, a lot of them get hurt with any further thought put into them. For example, the renewal at the beginning of the episode, I did enjoy getting more into Moclan culture. I love explorations of stuff like that, their traditions and whatnot, but I don't want to see Clyden and Bordis just get back together that easily after the conflict of Tale of Two Utopias. I'm glad Clyden came back and they're starting to repair things, but we needed to see that arc. We needed to see Bordis dealing with his emotions, dealing with his anger at Clyden for abandoning him and Topa. It was just way too easy, and their relationship is like better than ever now, and it just feels unearned at this point. So like the renewal scene was cool, fun, a little bit funny, but when you think about the broader context of the season, it just is incredibly underwhelming to resolve the Clyden Bordis situation that cleanly. And that's what you're going to find throughout this entire episode, is that there might be good, funny scenes, but when you think about them in context of the characters or overall, it's a lot of underwhelming and unimpactful resolutions to a lot of the character arcs that have been throughout this season. I did like how they brought back Twitter World temporarily, and it was something that very much surprised me. I really enjoy that planet from season 1, and it was nice to see it back again. I just wish we had actually gotten onto the planet and see how it had changed in the last few years. It really was only through the lens of the barista from the previous episode of Twitter World, so we really didn't see if anything, if at all, had changed. So that was a little bit disappointing. She was actually the best part of this episode. Everything to do with her dealing with the Union, getting used to this brand new society, being a fish out of water, all that stuff was phenomenal. If this episode has primarily focused on that storyline, it would have been a great episode, but the rest of the episode was too enthralled with wrapping up all the character stuff in case this is the series finale. So the voting world, Twitter stuff, that was interesting. Her discovering how the food replicator changed Earth and how it could change her planet. A lot of those discussions were very interesting ones, particularly one with Kelly, where Kelly says a society's ethical advancement needs to evolve parallel to their technological advancement. And that's a really cool idea that I'd love to see explored further, but it was just briefly mentioned, so it was an interesting concept, if nothing else. And to go in tandem with those sequences with the Twitter World girl is one of the most beautiful shots in the entirety of the Orville. And that's when they went to the holodeck, or the simulator in this case, and saw that comet place that was like hollowed out on the inside with these blue glowing stingray creatures who would swim through the ground towards this core of this comet, and it was really, really cool looking, and it was just so incredibly beautiful that I had to appreciate the CGI and just sit back and awe of this beauty. That was a very, very impressive sequence of the show, and one of the most beautiful shots in the Orville's entirety. Now, there were some good payoffs in minor ways, like Gordon's sandwich from a few episodes did come back after he sent it 3 months in the future, and I thought that was a neat payoff and how happy he was to see it. That was something that we needed, a little bit of character work done in that moment. Overall, Gordon really didn't have much to do besides whining about not being the best man. A lot of the stuff individually in a bigger episode or a different episode, they could work with some better context. It was just too much of this comedy, in my opinion. And Gordon really just needed that serious moment where he's eating the sandwich. And it's a small moment, but it was one of my favorite of the episode. Now, the one scene of comedy that I actually did implicitly enjoy was stripper Isaac at the bachelorette party. I thought that was hilarious, and it really made total sense. And just seeing Isaac going all at it, male stripper, Magic Mike style, was pretty funny. And when the tassels came out of his nipples, that was the one comedy sequence that I felt fit perfectly within the episode and really didn't detract from any emotional stakes or any emotional resolutions that were going on here. Now, my favorite scene of this episode did come as the resolution to the Twitter World Barista's arc, where Kelly takes her to the simulator again, but this time shows her Gendel 3, a planet in which First Contact, or at least the Union's version of First Contact, was done poorly, and the Prime Directive, or their version of the Prime Directive, was violated, which led to countless wars and an entire planet destroyed because that planet wasn't ethically evolved enough for the technology that the Union possessed at the time. And that was just a really neat reminder of why the Prime Directive is a concept in these sci-fi shows. And I really, really appreciated that scene, especially how it impacted the barista. And it was just very moving sequence, and it was a character arc for her within the episode, and it was a very neat, tight one. Not a whole lot of scenes. I really think she should have been the focus of her own episode, probably not in the finale, but it was a very moving, impactful scene and a small break from the comedy of the episode, focusing primarily on sci-fi concepts and the ethics and philosophy that sci-fi is so good at exploring. One of my favorite sequences. Now, the wedding, I'm a little bit conflicted on. I did love Gordon's speech, Bortus's speech. Though the wedding itself was emotional, I did like that Isaac and Claire were getting together. It was an interesting way to take things, and it's kind of a cliche to end a series on a wedding, but I think it worked for this one, especially with the added layer of Isaac not being built for this type of thing and this being a very unusual thing for him. So it was just a neat way of wrapping things up. It did do things quite quickly with a lot of the side characters, like Ed and Kelly hold hands at the end, and it's implied that they might be getting back together. It just really was too fast. This entire episode was resolving things at a breakneck speed, and it just didn't feel fulfilling. So I think season 4 is incredibly necessary because it was just not a good series finale, in my opinion. It was a good enough episode, but I don't think it resolved things in a positive manner. Overall, I did enjoy this episode. I think it might be the worst of New Horizons, which is really disappointing because the last episode that wrapped up the conflict with the Kalons and the conflict of New Horizons was probably the second best, my second favorite episode of this new season. And so to go from that high to this low was a little bit disappointing. This episode is enjoyable to watch. I have to stress that. I did really enjoy it. Just compared to the rest of this season, it was found lacking, in my opinion. I'd have to give this episode a 6.5 out of 10, and that sucks, but that's kind of where I feel about it. It was a little bit disappointing overall, and there was just so little character work done. That's my biggest thing. There was so much dialogue, but so little character work done. And it was just incredibly underwhelming, in my opinion, especially considering that this might be the end of the Orville and that this is the end of New Horizons. So New Horizons I've incredibly enjoyed, and it just wasn't wrapped up in a nice, cohesive way. And I do look forward to the future of the Orville, hope it's good, but this wasn't a great ending to New Horizons. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series,
Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.